So today I want to explore the theme of happiness, which is a theme that we all pursue, that society is almost obsessive about, but I'm choosing to focus on this today because in just 2 weeks, or a little less than 2 weeks actually, 9 days now, is Rosh Chodesh Adar, the first of the month of Adar, the Hebrew month of Adar, which is the month of happiness. In fact, Talmud says that when, that's the first reference right here, that when Adar enters, Mishenichnas Adar, Marbim Besimcha, we have to increase in happiness, which, by the way, alludes to the idea that we always have to be happy. Just during Adar, we increase that dose of happiness even more so. But what is happiness? How do you achieve happiness? That's the big question. And today I want to present to you really just 3 ideas, or maybe 3 keys that open up the gates of happiness. The first one really focuses on the idea that happiness has to come from within, or otherwise said, happiness equals self-fulfillment. If we can't fulfill ourselves, our unique selves, we can't really be happy. If I try to be someone else, which is the type of age we live in a comparative age, as someone called it, we're always comparing ourselves to others, then you will never be happy. But if I learn to embrace my deeper self and actualize my deeper self, that's when I can be happy. Now, I want to go to the Declaration of Independence and read some of the references here, and then delve a little bit deeper into what this means, that happiness comes from within. Does anyone want to read? Let's go to the third reference here. Let's see what it says in the United States Declaration of Independence. Anyone? We all know this. Yes, go for it, Mindy. We hold these truths.
That they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Right. And if you think about this, though, the pursuit of happiness sometimes thwarts happiness itself. Because if I'm always in the pursuit of happiness, then I'll be in the pursuit and I want to achieve happiness. In order to achieve happiness, I have to stop the pursuit. I have to say, well, maybe there's a reason for me to be happy right now. Maybe all I have to do is open up my eyes, not just to the blessings that I have around me, but as we said before, most importantly, to the blessings that I have within me, the blessings of skills, of talents, of personality that I have within. And in many ways, that's what Judaism demands of man, to stop the pursuit, but rather to focus on the now, on the within. If we can focus on that and actualize that, then we can become happy. And this is why I think there's no coincidence here that the very first law in the Code of Jewish Law, which is really spans on 4 very thick books, but the very first law is the law that says that one should not be ashamed. I'm reading here from the reference. One should not be ashamed because of people who mock him. Lo yitbayesh bifnei maligim. These are the exact words. One should not be ashamed of people who mock him. What does this mean? That when you begin the day and you say, thank you Hashem, modani lefanecha, and you start going out there to the world, make sure that you live a life that is true to yourself. And when you live a life that is true to yourself, you might have people who say, hey, look at this guy, look at what he or she thinks he or she is, or look at the bizarreness in that person, or whatever it may be. Don't be ashamed, because as long as you are living a life that is true to who you are, who you truly are, to your soul, to your skills, to your talents, then you'll be happy. And the mocking of other people won't even matter. You know that there's a great article that was published just time and time again by a woman by the name of Bonnie Ware. Bonnie Ware is a palliative nurse in Great Britain who wrote an article about the 5 top regrets of dying people. What do you think is the number 1 regret? Number 1. That's in the top 5. Not spending enough time with family. That certainly is in top 5. I don't remember what number. But the number 1, thank you, not being true to yourself. Now, what does it mean to be true to yourself? Be true to yourself doesn't mean, if you ask someone today, what does it mean to be true to yourself? Kids say that, oh, I have to be true to myself. What does that mean? Oscar Wilde said, be yourself because everybody else is taken. But what does it mean? What does it mean to be yourself? Okay, so that's the general answer that you'll get. But is that being true to yourself? Listening to your heart? Because your heart changes. Your heart tells you today to do one thing and tomorrow another thing. So are you true to yourself? If you just listen to your heart. Yes.
To be happy with who, like you said, who you are, and not to compare yourself to other people.
Okay, but define who you are. What does that mean?
Not like everything, like possessions, family, I guess.
Right. Okay. So fine. I hear you. Anyone else? Being true to yourself. What does the self mean? Okay, good. That which is number one, intangible, and number two, that which is eternal, that you'll always have. See, your heart will tell you something today, but tomorrow it will change. So it's not eternal. So being true to your heart is not the answer to that question. Being true to, I don't know, to your feelings or to. So, okay, so what does that mean? So it means number one, that it's not being true to your car. It's not being true to your home. It's not being true to your body. It's to the intangible, but it's also the eternal intangible, which is your values, which is that which won't change regardless of how the world changes around you, to your skills too, to your talents, because that also doesn't change. If God gave you a skill, you'll have that skill for the rest of your life. God gives you a talent, you'll have that talent for the rest of your life. And you should you should also set in your mind the values that you have that don't change, regardless of what happens again, because that's really what it means to be true to yourself. So when we say that the number one regret of dying people is that they weren't true to themselves, they are referring to not being true to their own values, that they had to change, that they had to compromise, they had to adjust, they had to adapt. But that eventually comes back to haunt you, because in many ways, happiness equals self-fulfillment. The fulfillment of our values, the fulfillment of our personalities, of our skills, and of our talents. And this is also why Viktor Frankl so brilliantly puts it in the Man's Search for Meaning, meaning that if someone has the right attitude, then he can almost withstand any challenge, because the attitude that a person has is very much interconnected with the value system that a person has. My value system tells me that I am divine and that I have to follow divine values. So it doesn't matter whether I'm in a Holocaust like Viktor Frankl was, or whether I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona, or whether I'm in the war in Gaza, like my son was for so many months. You have that set of values, and that gives you the right attitude to deal with every how. Almost what Nietzsche said, Nietzsche that Frankl himself quotes in The Man's Search for Meaning, that anyone who has a why can handle almost any how. If I have a why to live, which is again myself, my set of values, like we said, then I can handle almost anyhow. Let's just read Frankel's powerful line here. Does anyone want to read? Everything can be taken from a man. Please. Right. And in many ways, this is also why we need good role models. We need good mentors. We need good friends to remind us from time to time that, hey, you have such a great self in here. Don't allow others to get to you. Viktor Frankl himself had a great mentor that saved him, that enabled him to publish Man's Search for Meaning. Even though during the time he published it, it went against the teachings of his own teachers, of Sigmund Freud, of Carl Jung, that he studied from. He developed, as you may know, the school of logotherapy, which really says, the condensed idea, the main idea of this school is that if a person has meaning in his life, then that meaning is what gives him the drive, gives him the happiness, gives him all that he needs to live on. And you saw that in Auschwitz. You saw that when inmates had some search for meaning, that's why he called the book Search for Meaning. For example, if they had a dream to establish a family one day, if they had a dream to start a job one day, if they had a dream that gave them the strength to overcome all of their terrible and even unfathomable suffering at Auschwitz. But Viktor Frankl himself, in 1956, it's a famous story, it's been published, but thought of quitting. People were saying to him, hey, how dare you go against your own teachers? This logotherapy is nothing but garbage. And he took it to heart to the point that he wrote a resignation letter to the University of Vienna, and he wanted to move and to escape society altogether, to move to Australia. As he finished writing his resignation letter, as he was all packed to move to Australia, all of a sudden there's a knock on his door. And he opens the door, and a woman introduces herself by the name of Margaret. And he doesn't know her. He says, what are you doing here? Who are you? She says, you don't know me, but I am an emissary of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the late Lubavitcher Rebbe, a rabbi in Brooklyn that you may have heard of. And he came with the message that you should not quit, that you should stay strong in the face of opposition, and that you have a message that the world needs to hear. So whatever you do, don't quit. Viktor Frankl apparently sobbed, and he says, how does this rabbi even know my situation? He hadn't shared anything with anyone. But at that moment, he decided to not quit and to publish his book, a book that has become one of the greatest bestsellers of all time. I think it has now more than 25 million copies published across the world. Because he was a great rabbi who understood that Viktor Frankl too needed to stay true to himself, to his values, to his calling for the world. So that's the number one prerequisite to happiness. Fulfilling your deeper self, which, as mentioned, is your skills, your talents, your sets of values that form the attitude that one must have each and every day, an attitude that is not intimidated by those who mock him. Number two, happiness equals giving. Now, I just want to preface this by saying, and I've said this in the past, but it's interesting because there are many words for happiness, both in English and also in Hebrew. But the two maybe most prominent words for happiness in Hebrew is the word, you know it? I'm sure you all know it. Simcha, right? Thank you. And what's the other word? Osher, that's right. Osher, like Ashrei Yoshvei V'techa, Ashreinu Matov Chelkeinu. It's a word, Osher, which maybe means, maybe it's the same as the difference between happiness and joy in English. But what's the main difference between the two? Very simple. Osher is happiness that you feel. Simcha is happiness that you do. Osher is happiness that you feel and is entirely dependent on outside circumstances. So if I receive good news, I feel happy. If I go to a concert, I feel happy. But I have to have those outside circumstances to make me feel happy, to make me have Osher. Simcha is different. Simcha is entirely dependent on you. If you go and visit the sick, you made someone happy and it made you happy. If you give tzedakah, you made someone happy and it made you happy. If you help someone and do a good deed, you did something good and you therefore brought happiness to the world, but it brought you happiness too. That's why the greatest remedy to depression, I'm not talking about clinical depression, but to depression in general, is do a good deed. Do a good deed and you'll see it will pull you out of that immediately. And this is really the focus of this month. This month is the month of happiness, this coming month of Adar. Why? Because we do good during this month. And when we do good, it increases our happiness. When do we do good? We do good mainly during this festival of Purim. During the festival of Purim, of course, we're all celebrating the great miracle that Haman wanted to kill us. And Baruch Hashem, with the infiltration of Queen Esther and her convincing Achashverosh and the prayers of Mordechai and the guidance of Mordechai, we were all saved and we know the story. But we celebrate this festival not by saying, thank you, Mordechai and Esther, not by praying too much, as it is on Yom Kippur, but by doing happiness, simcha. There are 4 prominent mitzvahs on Purim that have one common denominator, and that's doing happiness, simcha. Let's read about them. Reading the Megillah, let's go. Does anyone want to read? The very last reference here. On this festive holiday, there are 4 mitzvot. Anyone? Please. Yes.
Reading the Megillah, also known as the Book of Esther, sending mishloach manot or gift baskets, the Suda or festival meal, matanot live yonim, giving to the poor.
That's right, giving charity to the poor. They all have, again, the simcha component attached to them. Reading the Megillah in the community, because we got to spread the word to the community. So we're engaging in community, we're doing for the community, and that creates happiness. We give gift baskets to others, that brings them happiness, and therefore brings us happiness. The festive meal is also done, again, with community. It brings them happiness, it brings us happiness, and the giving to the poor also brings the poor happiness, so it brings us happiness. This is also why, if you think about this, it might seem, at least on the surface, as a very cruel law, but the mitzvah of tzedakah is a mitzvah for all, even for the poor. Now you may say, well, it's not fair. If a poor person gives money today to tzedakah, he won't have food to eat, because he's dependent on that money that he just gave to tzedakah for his own meal. How can you force the poor to give tzedakah? Does that make sense to you? Why force the poor to give tzedakah? It's a code. It's a law in the code of Jewish law. You see it right here. Hilchot tzedakah. Does anyone know why? That's right. Because actually giving tzedakah is not doing someone else a favor. It's doing you a favor. Not telling the poor that he doesn't have to give tzedakah would be denying him happiness, denying him simcha. And that's what's unfair to the poor. So maybe he doesn't have to give the full dollar that he has. Maybe he can give just 10 cents, but he still has to give, because not giving will be denying the poor happiness, and that no one is allowed to do. And that's why he still needs to give tzedakah. So again, the most important is to do good and do good and do good, and that is what brings simcha. Happiness equals giving. That's why I often say, I say this to my children, I say this primarily to myself, but we don't go to sleep at night in the Allouche family if we haven't asked ourselves if the question is have I done at least 5 good deeds for someone else today? Now, as you grow older, it goes from 5 good deeds to 6 good deeds to 7 good deeds. But one should not go to sleep before they do good. You know why? Not necessarily for the goodness in the world, but for your own sake, for your own happiness. Because if you go to sleep without doing any good deed throughout the day, you may know it consciously or subconsciously, but you'll go to sleep miserably. Deep inside, you'll say to yourself, I haven't fulfilled myself today. I haven't given. And if happiness comes from giving, then I haven't achieved happiness today. So you don't go to sleep before you do at least 5 good deeds. And it doesn't have to be major good deeds too. It could be just picking up the phone and saying, hi, hello, I was thinking about you and I just want to cheer you up. Or just, helping your sibling do homework. Or open the door for somebody, yeah. Yes, that's a nice little thing to do. It's, I would say that's like a quarter giving. I don't know if it's full giving. Yeah, especially if he says after you with a smile. Yeah.
Does tzedakah mean justice? And is it true that there's no word really that says charity?
Very good. Very good. We didn't go into this, but you're absolutely right. No, you're absolutely right. That's a very, very good point. Tzedakah doesn't mean charity. And we've mentioned this in the past, but there are 3 words that are prominent words in the Jewish faith that just are mistranslated, to say the least. They just are wrong. The translation is completely wrong. One of them is tzedakah. Tzedakah doesn't mean charity. Tzedakah means justice, because you are doing that which is just. not that which is charitable, not that which you can do, but that which you have to do. That's what tzedakah means. The other two words, as a side note, is tefillah. What's tefillah? Prayer. That's a Christian translation to tefillah. That's not what tefillah means. Tefillah means connection. So when I pray, I connect to God. And then the third word, well, sin, that's right. That's another word that's very badly translated. Chet does not mean sin. Chet means deviation. So when a person sins, it's not like, oh, I've become impure. No, you just deviated. Now it's time to return. But that's exactly the other word that I was looking for. Teshuvah. Teshuvah in Hebrew is often translated as repentance, but it's not. Teshuvah means to return to your true self, that self that we spoke about, to your values, to your God, to your soul. That's what teshuvah means. You're not just repenting and saying, okay, I feel sorry, let's move on. You're returning to your true self, and you're taking upon yourself to, from now on, live a life that is completely aligned with your true self. That's what teshuvah means. Anyway, so tzedakah falls in that category too, of words that are very badly translated. But it points to this idea that we have to do good for our sake. We have to do good. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Alaihi Shalom. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. 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 Beautiful. And you see, decades later, she tells the story, which comes to show the impact that it had on her. Yes, she gave the last piece of a raspberry, crumb. Yeah.
She gave it to her friend and she said, this is all I have in the world. And her friend said, and to me, she gave me.
Right. Just amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning it. It's exactly, it emphasizes this point so powerfully. Okay, so that's idea number 2 regarding happiness. Happiness equals giving. Idea number 3, happiness equals faith in God. Because in many, many, many ways, one cannot completely have happiness if one does not know how to surrender that which he cannot control to God. Very often, the source of our anxiety, or that which stands as the opposite of happiness, is our inability to just let go. To say that, oh, maybe there's a God that knows it all, that knows maybe more than I know, and will ensure that the scenario that I'm in will end up well. If I'm the only one in control, then I won't know how to also let go of that which I really cannot control. And that will only create stress and toxicity. So what do? You take that which you cannot control and you give it up to higher powers, they say in the 12-step program. You give it up. You say, God, I have faith in you, and I'm sure that you, as the master of the universe, will make sure that even though I am seemingly going under a test, under some pressure, I know that you'll make sure that it will turn out well. That's what faith in God really means. Now, there's a difference between, in Hebrew, just to go a little bit deeper into this, between what's called emunah, and which is usually translated as faith, and bitachon, which is translated as trust. The difference between faith and trust, or emunah and bitachon, is that trust is a much deeper level of faith. Trust is not just that I have faith that it will be good, but trust is that I have faith that right now is good. Right now, even the bad is good. And I'll give you 2 quick examples so that I won't get into the other references here. But in the Talmud, there are 2 stories about Rabbi Akiva and about Nachum Ish Gamzu. 2 stories, each one of them reflecting emunah and bitachon. Rabbi Akiva's story is how one day he had to travel. And at night, during his travels, he reached this village and He was looking for an inn. There was no inn in the village. They didn't like guests in that village. So they had no inns. So he started knocking on doors, saying, can I stay by you? Can I stay? And no one wanted him. They didn't like guests in that village. He didn't know what to do. He was a stranger from a strange town, and he doesn't know where to sleep. And everyone is saying no. But while everyone is saying no, he's saying, Kol man David lachmana letavavid. Whatever God does is for the good. I don't know why. Right now I'm experiencing rejection, but it's for the good. And he goes into the forest because he has nowhere else to sleep. And he says, I'll just sleep here. And he ties his donkey to a tree and his rooster that he had as an alarm clock, because we had no alarm clocks then. And he takes out his candle in order to be able to study at night. He turns it on. And shortly thereafter, a massive wind comes and blows his candle and he can't light it again. Shortly thereafter, he hears a cat attacking his rooster, devouring his rooster. And thereafter, he hears some animal attacking his donkey. But with each and every suffering, he says, whatever God does is for the good. I don't know why, but I'm sure it's for the good. He woke up in the morning and he heard that bandits had invaded the village that said no to him. And he said, now I know why it was for the good. Because first, if those people of that village would have said yes to me, I would have been attacked by the bandits. If my donkey wouldn't have been attacked, the bandits would have heard the donkey and they would have come and attacked me. Same with the rooster. Same with the light. They would have seen me. So you see, everything that God does is for the good. At that moment, when he experienced rejection, when he experienced his animals being devoured, when he experienced his flame being extinguished, he didn't know what was good about it. But he had emunah. He had faith. Trust is something else. Trust is from the story of Nachum Ish Gamzu. Nachum Ish Gamzu is a story in the Tractate of Shabbat in the Talmud that speaks about how the Jewish people wanted to find grace in the eyes of the Roman governor of the time that ruled the land of Israel. So he decided to bring him a very, very expensive gift. The gift was a treasure box of pearls and diamonds inside, just to again appease him and find favor in his eyes. Now, the problem was that they didn't know who to send as the representative of the Jewish people because they didn't trust anybody. Someone could steal a diamond or pearl and no one would know. They said, oh, but there's a guy who's very trustworthy, Nachum Ish Gamzu, really a pious man, a sage. We'll send him as the representative of the Jewish people. So he sent with this big treasure box, and he's on his way to the Roman governor. On the way, he has to stay over at an inn at night. He goes to the hotel. He puts his treasure box right next to him, and he falls asleep. During that night, a robber comes and sees that treasure box. He opens it and he finds all these pearls. He says, I'm going to steal everything. And he started emptying it all out. But he didn't want Nachum Ish Gamzu to realize that someone had stolen all of those pearls and diamonds. So he filled the box with sand instead. So that when Nachum would wake up in the morning and he would carry this box, it would weigh more or less the same. And he wouldn't bother to check whether the diamonds or the pearls were still there, which is exactly what happened. Nachum Ish Gamzu wakes up in the morning, takes the box, thinking that there's not pearls and diamonds, but there's only sand because of this thief. He continues on to the Roman governor, and the Roman governor says, thank you so much. He opens up the box, and he finds sand. Now he's livid. And he says, what? This is what you Jews are all about? You come to mock me? And Nachum Ish Gamzu says to himself, Gamzu letova, this is also for the good. And that's why he was named Nachum Ish Gamzu. Also this is for the good. What could be good? In sand. Especially in sand, in lieu of diamonds and pearls. So he thinks, and he has an idea. He says, maybe, Governor, it's not just regular sand that you're accustomed to. This is the type of sand that Abraham, our forefather, used to use against his enemies. If you throw that sand, something will happen to you and to the sand, just like it happened to Abraham and to his sand. What is it? You throw that sand, it turns into weapons. And that's how Abraham was able to overcome all of his enemies, and that's how you, Roman governor, will be able to overcome all your enemies. He says, I don't believe you. He says, try it. Throw the sand. So he takes some sand, throws it in the air, and lo and behold, a miracle happened. The sand turned into knives and swords and weapons. And then the Roman governor was so thankful. He said, Nachum, wow, thank you so much. This is the best gift I've ever received. He rewarded him back. He said, bring this reward to the Jewish community. And Nachum said, you see, even this, not it will be good. The Roman governor will change his mind and understand that a thief, no, not some time in the future. Trust is knowing that even the bad, the seeming bad, the sand itself is good. So it's a whole different other level. I don't know if everyone can attain that level, that when you experience suffering, when you experience pain, you say, no, it's actually good, it's gain, it's not pain, it's triumph, not tears. It's hard. But on the other hand, that's the ultimate level of faith. And when you have faith, whether emunah or bitachon or trust, then no doubt that paves the way to happiness. This is also why we recite the Shema twice a day, both in the morning and the evening. Why? Let's read what the Code of Jewish Law has to say. The prayer of the Shema Israel. Does anyone want to read? Please. Mm-hmm. Right, these are very powerful words, again, from the Code of Jewish Law. We say the Shema twice, as is said here, because we have to understand that even though we may be experiencing nights, the same God that was present during the day, Shema Israel, He's also present during the night. And having faith in that God, that He will not only enable us to overcome this darkness, but maybe even sometimes to find out that the darkness itself was actually light, like the sand of Nachum Gamzu, is also what gives way to happiness. This is why, and by the way, it's Psalm 139 that we're about to read here was that was Rabbi Shtatz's favorite psalm. He loved it. In fact, Ibn Ezra, the 13th century Spanish poet, writes that it is also the most important psalm of the 150 psalms in the book of Psalms. But this is why it says what it says here. If I ascend to the heavens, does anyone want to continue to read here? Just one more reference. If I ascend to the heavens, please.
Take up the wings of dawn. If I dwell at the end of the west, there too your hand will lead me.
Right. And Rabbi Steinzas would explain, again, this was his favorite psalm, would explain this by the way of a parable, a beautiful parable that I think I've shared in the past, but about a mother and an infant who would travel the world. Let's say that she went with her infant from Phoenix to, come on, help me out, to New York, to to France, to Japan. Let's go, yeah. France, Japan, and Sydney, Australia. Now, when they land in Sydney, Australia, finally, and you ask the mother, where were you? She'll tell you. I was in Phoenix, I was in New York, I was in France, I was in Japan, and I'm in Australia. If you ask the infant, where were you? The infant will tell you, I don't know, I was in my mother's arms. Oh. In many ways, when we have this emunah and bitachon, this faith and trust in God, we can say, it doesn't matter where we are. And I know during the day we travel to many places, mentally, emotionally. We're all over the place. We travel even to further places in Sydney, Australia. But if we know all the time that we are, here you are, or there you are too, right? Wherever you are, wherever I am, to the heavens, to the grave, I'm in God's arms. I'm in my mother's embrace, and nothing really phases me. And in many ways, this is really what true happiness is about. This is why in Yom Kippur, we have a prayer that's dedicated to how really we are in Hashem's hands all the time, whether we know it or not. As the clay in the hand of the potter, as the stone in the hand of the mason, as the iron in the hand of the blacksmith, as the anchor in the hand of the sailor, as the glass in the hand of the glazier, as the cloth in the hand of the weaver, as the silver in the hand of the silversmith. God is really in full control of who we are. And then we ask God at the end of Yom Kippur, pay attention to our long-running covenant, because we are really one with you. And don't attach importance to our yetzer, to our evil inclination, to our superficial anxiety, to our beating up on ourselves, and to our self-judgment. You know, one of the great stories is the story of this old Jew who went to this Broadway show. And he realized that the main actor of that Broadway show ended his act with Psalm 23, and he would sing it so beautifully. And this is how he would end his play, with a crescendo and receive a big round of applause. Now, one day he went up to the actor and he said, I know I've been to your show many times. I know you ended with Psalm 23, the Psalm by David, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack, etc. Do you mind if tonight, during your show, you call me up on stage and I will say Psalm 23 instead of you? He says, what are you talking about? This is my crescendo. I can't do it. He says, please, I promise you won't regret it. He says, you know what? I'll let you. That night, at the end of the show, this old Jew is called up on stage, and the shepherd, the actor says, okay, go ahead, read, the Lord is my shepherd, go do it. He doesn't sing it. He doesn't even sing on tune. He just recites it. But when he finished reciting Psalm 23, everyone stood up and gave him the biggest round of applause that this show has ever seen. So the main actor then approaches this old Jew and he says to him, I don't know how you did it. This is like my ending. And I usually, receive also a big round of applause, but not like you received. How did you manage to stir these emotions? And he said, look, the difference between you, big actor, and me, the simple Jew, is that you may know Psalm 23. I know the shepherd. That's the difference. And that's why it evoked this reaction. When you know the shepherd, then you're not too worried about all the challenges, all the impediments, all the obstacles that you face. Because you have faith that either everything that God does is for the good, kol man David Rachmana letav avid, or even more so, that gam zu letova, even this is for the good. So just to summarize, 3 keys to happiness as we prepare for this month of happiness in Adar is: number 1, happiness comes from fulfilling ourselves, a set of values, skills, our talents. Number 2, giving, and more giving. And number 3, again, having emunah and hopefully even bitachon, trust in Hashem, especially regarding the things that we know we cannot control.